The Galactic Council's chamber floated in the void above the star system of Threxel Prime. It was a massive ring-shaped station, lit with pulsing blue light and guarded by fleets from every major species in the galaxy. Inside, the leaders of the oldest and most powerful civilizations gathered to pass judgment on humanity. Earth's representative, Ambassador Kellen Hart, stood alone in the center of the circle. His shoulders were squared, but his eyes showed exhaustion. Behind him, a giant holographic screen displayed images, human warships over disputed planets, footage of riots in colonies, and intercepted transmissions showing aggressive human expansion. High Chancellor Vecca Thune, tall and scaled, with glowing yellow eyes, raised a clawed hand for silence. "We gave the humans a place among us," Vecca's voice echoed across the chamber. "And what did they bring? Conflict, chaos, defiance." Other delegates nodded. Some were silent. A few, like the gentle-faced Arvekni and the cyborg Sorelians, looked uneasy. Kellen's voice cut through the silence. "Humanity is flawed, yes, but we've adapted, grown. We deserve a chance to fix our mistakes." But the Council had already decided. By a vote of 27-3, Earth was banished from the Galactic Council. All trade routes were closed. All Council-affiliated ships were ordered to avoid human space. Any human ship found beyond the fringe boundary would be seen as hostile. Earth was alone. News of the banishment spread like wildfire. On colonies like Vesta 4, Mars, and Europa Prime, panic set in. Supplies stopped coming. Medicines ran out. Council tech embedded in infrastructure was disabled remotely. Entire cities went dark overnight. On Orion Station, a research facility orbiting the moon of Titan, a 10-year-old boy named Jackson Morrow watched the news with wide eyes. His father, Commander Ryan Morrow, paced back and forth in the control room, barking orders as evacuation alarms blared. His mother, a systems engineer, tried to bring the failing energy core back online. Jackson stood at the window, watching the stars beyond the reinforced glass. "Dad," Jackson asked quietly, "why are they leaving us?" Ryan didn't answer right away. He glanced at his son, face tight with worry. "Because they're afraid of what we could become." Moments later, the station shook violently. A Council enforcement ship, sent to ensure order, had fired a warning shot. But warning shots near an unstable reactor had consequences. "Get him to the pods," Jackson's father shouted. His mother grabbed his hand and ran. Behind them, explosions echoed through the station's metal corridors. People screamed. Fire alarms wailed. The air grew hot, then heavy with smoke. Jackson was thrown into a pod. The hatch sealed. Through the small window, he saw the station breaking apart. His parents weren't with him. His pod launched into the cold of space. He screamed their names, but no one answered. The pod drifted for 2 days before it was picked up by a freighter from a mining colony in the Fringe Zone, a lawless outer rim of the galaxy. The crew gave him water, food, and silence. They knew what had happened. Everyone did. The Fringe Zone was far from the central systems, full of abandoned colonies, pirates, smugglers, and forgotten tech. But it was also full of survivors. Over the next years, Jackson lived among miners, engineers, and ex-soldiers. He watched humanity struggle, adapt, and slowly begin to rebuild, piece by piece, ship by ship. He never forgot that day on Orion Station, never forgot the fire, the silence, the stars. The Galactic Council had turned its back on Earth, but Earth would not stay silent forever. 25 years had passed since the Council banished Earth. In the outer reaches of the galaxy, where stars burned dim and trade routes vanished, humanity had built something few expected, an empire born in exile. The Fringe Zone, once a wasteland of dead systems and forgotten outposts, had become the heart of a silent revolution. From asteroid mines, scavenged derelicts, and salvaged alien tech, humans created new life. Their cities were not beautiful like the floating gardens of the Varnathi, or advanced like the energy towers of the Sorelians, but they were strong, efficient, and hidden. No maps showed the true extent of the Fringe Empire. No galactic records listed their fleet numbers. But in the void between stars, they were everywhere. And at the center of it all was Captain Jackson Morrow. Jackson stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie, a sleek, black-hulled battlecruiser that cut through space like a blade. He wore a dark command jacket, no medals or decorations, just the symbol of the human vanguard, a silver phoenix rising from ash. "Status?" he asked calmly. "Entering Sector 19, said his second-in-command, Lieutenant Marek. "No council signals detected, but long-range scans show activity near the border." Jackson nodded. "Maintain stealth mode. Let's not show them what we've built. Not yet." He turned to the viewport, eyes scanning the field of stars. To most, this part of space was empty. But he knew better. Hidden in the asteroid fields were automated relay stations, early warning beacons, and deep space hangars filled with experimental fighters. This was the true strength of the Fringe Empire, not raw numbers, but precision, stealth, and unity. Unity forged in betrayal. Later that day, an emergency transmission crackled through. "This is Outpost Vega, requesting immediate assistance. We're under attack." Unknown vessel repeating. Unknown vessel. Jackson reacted instantly. "Plot a jump. Launch intercept drones. Full power to shields." The Valkyrie vanished in a burst of folded light, emerging minutes later, above a small mining colony, nestled into the icy surface of a shattered moon. Below, plasma fire lit the sky. A massive ship, sleek, silver, and clearly not human, hovered above the outpost. Its weapons tore through defensive turrets with ease. "Council tech. Confirm ID," Jackson ordered. Marek replied after a moment. "Signal matches Council encryption. It's masked, but this isn't a pirate or rogue ship. They know what they're doing." Jackson's jaw tightened. The Council had sworn they wouldn't interfere, but here they were, testing the borders, testing humanity. "No more hiding," Jackson muttered. "Target engines. Disable, don't destroy." The Valkyrie's cannons roared to life, sending precise blasts that crippled the alien ship without killing its crew. The Council vessel spun out, losing power, and crashed into a nearby crater. Jackson gave the order to stand down. "Recover any data cores," he said, "and bring survivors to medical." "We're not them." Back on the Valkyrie, engineers pulled a charred data core from the Council ship. After hours of decoding, Marek brought it to Jackson's private quarters. "You'll want to see this." Jackson took the datapad. It showed surveillance logs, intercepted human transmissions, and reports sent to the Council's central command. One phrase repeated often: "Human expansion exceeds projections. Their tech is evolving. Recommend preemptive action." Jackson stared at the words. "They're watching us," he said quietly. "They're afraid." Marek looked at him. "What do we do?" Jackson stood slowly, the datapad still in hand. "We do what they never expected." He turned toward the stars. "We step into the light." The next day, Jackson stood before the High Assembly of the Fringe Empire. Delegates from Old Earth, Mars, Vesta, Titan, and more filled the chamber. Leaders who once feared exposure, now unified by something greater. "They came to our doorstep," Jackson said, holding up the damaged data core. "They call us dangerous. They fear what we've become." He paused. "But we didn't build this empire for war. We built it to survive, to prove we were more than what they claimed." Voices murmured in agreement. "It's time," he continued. "Time the galaxy sees us, not as rebels, not as threats, but as equals." Silence followed. Then one by one, hands were raised in support. The vote was unanimous. The Fringe Empire would no longer hide. Humanity was ready to return to the stars. The Valkyrie cruised in silent mode through the void of deep space. Its lights were dimmed, engines barely humming, hidden from every sensor. Captain Jackson Morrow stood on the command deck, staring at the dark starfield ahead. He wasn't just a soldier now. He was the face of humanity's return. Word had spread across the Fringe Empire after the Council attack on Outpost Vega. Delegates had voted in favor of contact, not with the Galactic Council, but with independent alien races who had always remained outside the Council's grip. Humanity needed allies, or at least witnesses. Approaching neutral zone, Lieutenant Marek reported. "Coordinates confirmed. The Volii delegation awaits." Jackson gave a simple nod. "Bring us in slow." all weapons powered down. The Vorlai were a crystalline species, peaceful and reclusive, living in the deep gas fields of the Kelvinar Drift. Their ships were transparent, grown rather than built, and their language pulsed with light and sound. They had long refused to join the Council, calling it too rigid, too focused on control over cooperation. If anyone would listen to Earth's plea, it would be them. Jackson stepped into the docking bay as the Vorlai ship approached. Its hull shimmered like ice under sunlight. A soft tone echoed as the airlock opened, and 3 Vorlai emissaries floated inside. Their forms were tall and glowing, with pulsing cores at their centers. Jackson greeted them with a hand over his chest, the human sign of peace. "We thank you for meeting with us," he said simply. The Vorlai replied in a soft, layered tone. "We remember your silence. We remember your exile. Now we see you again." "We didn't come for war," Jackson said. "We came to show we've changed. We came to speak for our people." They listened. He explained how Earth had survived, how the Fringe Empire had risen, how humans had rebuilt not through conquest, but cooperation. He told them of the Council's secret surveillance, the attack on Vega, the data recovered from the captured ship. The Vorlai stood still for a long time. Their lights dimmed and flared as they spoke among themselves. "You seek allies," one finally said. "Or witnesses." "Both," Jackson admitted. "We'll face the Council alone if we must. But if others know the truth, maybe we won't have to." There was no answer. Not yet. The meeting ended peacefully. But as the Vorlai ship prepared to leave, alarms suddenly blared across the Valkyrie. "Unidentified vessels incoming." Marek shouted from the command deck. 3 ships, Council signatures confirmed. "Where did they come from?" Jackson demanded. "They must have been tracking the Vorlai." Outside, Council warships dropped from warp, sleek, silver, and twice the size of the Valkyrie. Energy weapons charged as their hulls lit up. "This is High Captain Lorvin of the Galactic Council," came a harsh voice over the comms. "You are interfering with Council diplomacy. Withdraw or be fired upon." Jackson narrowed his eyes. "So now we're not just exiles. We're criminals for speaking." He turned to Marek. "Shields up, but don't fire. Open a channel to the Vorlai." On screen, the Vorlai emissary appeared, light flickering nervously. "Now you see what we face," Jackson said. "We came in peace. They came in force." The Vorlai hesitated, but then, to everyone's surprise, powered up their own shields and moved between the Valkyrie and the Council ships. "The meeting is not over," they declared. "You will not fire." The Council ships paused. For the first time, their aggression was blocked, not by weapons, but by presence, by witness. After a tense standoff, the Council vessels withdrew into warp. Back in his quarters, Jackson sat alone with a cup of cold coffee. The tension of the day still hung in his chest. The Vorlai hadn't promised anything, but their action had sent a message. Humanity was no longer invisible. Marek entered with a datapad. "Sir, you need to see this." Jackson took it and scanned the message. It was a recording, encrypted, sent from a hidden source. The voice was familiar, harsh, cold. "Veka Thun, High Chancellor of the Galactic Council. Let them speak. Let them gather strength, then crush them before their influence spreads." Jackson set the datapad down, the words echoing in his mind like thunder. The Council wasn't just watching. They were preparing for war. He looked out the viewport, toward the distant stars. They had wanted to silence humanity, but now the galaxy was listening. The stars no longer felt silent. In the weeks following the Vorlai incident, reports poured in from every edge of the Fringe Empire. Patrols intercepted strange signals. Outposts received coded threats, and then finally it happened. The Galactic Council struck first. At dawn cycle on the mining colony Darrow 3, explosions ripped through the sky. Orbital defense systems, still half operational, lit up with red alerts. Council raiders, masked and unmarked, descended on the surface with precision. They destroyed power grids, data vaults, and communication hubs. By the time reinforcements arrived, over 300 civilians were dead, and the colony was burning. News spread fast, and with it anger. Captain Jackson Morrow stood in the central war room aboard the Valkyrie. A 3D map floated above the table, showing colony markers flashing red. Officers gathered around him, faces grim, eyes hardened. "They didn't just cross the line," Jackson said. "They buried it." Lieutenant Marek stepped forward. "Council forces are operating in cells, quick strikes, masked IDs, no official war declaration." Jackson nodded slowly. "So they still want to pretend we don't exist." He looked at his officers. "We're done waiting." The human vanguard moved fast. Within 3 days, Jackson led a strike force to intercept a council carrier ship near the Varnathi Drift. The Valkyrie, flanked by 2 destroyers, dropped from warp into a field of scattered moons and unstable gravity wells. The enemy carrier loomed ahead, refueling at a hidden outpost. Jackson gave clear orders: target their engines, disable them. No unnecessary deaths. Lasers and plasma fire lit the darkness. Human ships were faster, smaller, smarter. They moved like hunters darting between asteroid shadows, using council communication blind spots. The battle lasted only 20 minutes. The enemy carrier was left adrift, its crew unharmed, its weapons frozen. Jackson stood on the bridge as the council ship's distress beacon blinked slowly in the dark. "We could have destroyed them," Marek said. "I know," Jackson replied, "but we're not them." As the Valkyrie returned, news arrived from the inner colonies. Humanity was responding. Volunteers flooded recruitment stations. Scientists doubled efforts on stealth and AI ship systems. Engineers, once working in hidden bunkers, now built openly on refitted moons. But it wasn't all victory. The Council began spreading propaganda. Across neutral systems, they called humans rogue aggressors, claiming Earth was building weapons of mass destruction, preparing to conquer. They broadcast old footage, wars from Earth's past, chaos from its exile years, to paint a picture of fear. Some alien races believed it. Others began to question, and some stayed silent. One evening, Jackson visited the lower decks of the Valkyrie. He walked past soldiers in training, mechanics repairing scorch-marked hulls, and engineers testing experimental drone fighters. He stopped beside a group of young recruits, barely adults, gathered around a worn-out table. They looked up, surprised to see their commander. "You all from Vega?" Jackson asked. A girl with a buzz cut nodded. "We lost everything. Joined up the next day." Jackson nodded. He wanted to say something comforting, something heroic, but all he said was, "Good. We'll need you." Back in his quarters, Jackson sat down with a recording from his intelligence division. A message intercepted from within Council Command. It was short. "Target Morrow. Eliminate with priority. End the movement at its source." He stared at it for a while. They weren't just attacking colonies. They were coming for him. 3 days later, a Council assassin ship ambushed the Valkyrie in transit. It used experimental cloaking tech and precision plasma weapons. The first strike hit the engine bay. Fire spread fast. Emergency doors sealed. Jackson raced to the bridge through smoke-filled corridors. He barked orders, coordinating with AI drones already launching in defense. The battle in deep space was chaotic, but the Valkyrie endured. The assassin ship was destroyed. Casualties: 12. One of them was Jackson's personal technician, a friend from his childhood days on the mining colony. He didn't speak at the funeral. He simply stood at the edge of the launch bay as the body pods floated into the void. That night, in the war room, Jackson faced the high command of the Fringe Empire via holo conference. "They've made it clear," he said. "This isn't defense anymore. This is war. But if we hit back too hard," one general said, "we become the monsters they say we are." Jackson looked them all in the eye. "We're not striking for revenge. We're striking to survive, to show them we're here, and that we will not fall again." He paused, then added, voice firm, "Prepare the fleet. We hold the line at the Nebula Gates." The war had truly begun, and humanity, once exiled, was now the force pushing back. The Nebula Gates were beautiful and deadly. A massive stretch of space, filled with glowing clouds of gas and twisting gravitational currents. The gates formed a natural border between the Fringe Empire and the Galactic Council's core systems. Few dared to travel through without powerful shielding and advanced navigation systems. Now it was the battlefield. Captain Jackson Morrow stood on the command deck of the Valkyrie, watching real-time projections flicker across the holotable. Enemy markers had begun to appear, slowly at first, like raindrops. Then they came in clusters. Council fleets, heavily armed, formation tight, moved in like a storm. All units in position, Lieutenant Marek reported. Defensive drones are deployed. Outer fleet reports ready. Jackson's voice was calm. And the civilians, evacuation complete. Safe tunnels are sealed. No one's left behind. Jackson gave a short nod. Good. Then this is where we hold them. Across the fringe empire, tension crackled like static. Colony broadcasts fell silent. Stations shut down external lights. In underground command centers and makeshift bunkers, families waited. This was not just another skirmish. This was the moment humanity would stand or fall. The battle began without warning. Council cruisers broke through the mist of the nebula, weapons firing in synchronized bursts. Human ships responded with fast, precise strikes, lighter, quicker, darting between debris fields. Automated defense satellites, lit up like stars going nova, intercepting enemy missiles. Jackson's fleet moved like a machine. Every pilot, every gunner, every engineer had been trained for this. They didn't outnumber the enemy, but they outmaneuvered them. Still, the enemy pressed hard. The Council's flagship, the Deliverance, pushed through the outer defense line, its hull reinforced with rare alloys. It unleashed a barrage that shook the Valkyrie, knocking out internal gravity and rupturing a side wing. Shields at 34%. Marek reported. We can't take another direct hit. Redirect power from the engines. Jackson ordered. We hold this line no matter what. The Valkyrie spun sharply, dodging a rail cannon blast. Its counterattack struck the Council destroyer below, splitting it in half with a silent explosion of fire and metal. Hours passed. The nebula burned with the wreckage of both sides, and then the signal came. Commander, a comms officer called out. We've found something. A deep strike team, human, heading toward the Council capital. They planned to detonate a gravitic bomb. Jackson froze. Who gave that order? No one, sir. Rogue unit. They call themselves the Final Flame. They think this war can only end if the Council is crippled. Marek looked up. They'll kill millions. Civilians, children. Jackson didn't hesitate. Send a message. Tell them to stand down. No response. Jackson turned to the navigation officer. Plot an intercept course. We're stopping them. Hours later, in a remote star cluster, the Valkyrie caught up with the rogue unit. A tense standoff followed. The Final Flame fleet was smaller, but the bomb was real. A gravity destabilizer, illegal even by Council standards. Enough to collapse a planet. Jackson hailed their leader. This isn't the way, he said. We're better than this. The man on the screen, scarred, angry, spoke with fury. They tried to erase us. You don't win wars by playing fair. Jackson stepped forward. We didn't survive just to become what we hated. If we do this, we lose everything we built. For a long moment, no one moved. Then slowly, the enemy ship powered down its engines. The rogue commander sighed. I hope you're right. Jackson ended the transmission. He had made a choice. Mercy over destruction. When the Valkyrie returned to the nebula gates, Council forces were retreating. Word of the rogue strike plan had reached their fleet. But so had word of Jackson stopping it. The Council hesitated, not because they were afraid of weapons, but because they began to fear the truth. Humanity was not the enemy they had painted. Jackson stood once more in the war room, staring at the shrinking red markers on the map. We held them, Marek said quietly. Jackson didn't smile. We did more than that. He reached for the comms panel. Send a message to the Council. Direct to High Chancellor Vecker Thun. Tell him I want to talk. Aboard the neutral station Arcturus 1, Jackson stood alone across a long glass table from Vecker. The alien leader's golden eyes glowed dimly. His voice was cold. You cost us ships, lives, influence, and you attacked our colonies. Jackson replied. You lied. You feared our strength. Now you've seen it. Vecker narrowed his gaze. And now what? You want a throne, a seat at our table. Jackson's voice was steady. We want acknowledgement, recognition, a future. And not just for humans, for all who've been silenced. Silence filled the room. Then finally Vecca leaned back and said, "Your people have changed." Jackson didn't reply. He didn't need to. The battle was over, but the war for truth had just begun. A quiet calm hung over the galaxy like the first light after a storm. Ships no longer filled the skies near the nebula gates. The once chaotic battlefield had turned into a graveyard of twisted metal, floating wreckage and drifting silence. But beneath that silence was something greater, a shift. The Fringe Empire had survived. More than that, it had stood toe-to-toe with the Galactic Council and held its ground without becoming the monsters they were accused of being. For the first time in over a century, humanity was no longer hiding. They were leading. On board the Valkyrie, Captain Jackson Morrow stood alone in the observation deck. He stared through the transparent dome at the planet below, Arcturus 1, the neutral station where peace talks had begun. Bright lines of diplomatic ships moved in and out of orbit, a dance of tension and hope. The Council had not surrendered, but they had paused, and they had listened. That was more than Jackson ever expected. Behind him the door slid open. Lieutenant Marek entered, holding a datapad. "It's official," he said. "The Council has signed the Recognition Pact. The Fringe Empire is acknowledged as a sovereign power. We've been granted a voice and a vote." Jackson turned, the news settling over him like a long-held weight being set down. "They thought exile would break us," he said softly, "but it forced us to grow." Marek nodded. "And now," Jackson stared out the window again, "now we help build something better." Over the next weeks, the Recognition Pact reshaped the galaxy. Human representatives were invited to council chambers. Fringe diplomats met with alien races long isolated from the central systems. Technologies were shared, not taken. Agreements were signed, not forced. Colonies that once feared human ships now welcomed them. The Vorlai, silent observers during the war, were the first to sign a separate peace treaty with Earth. Others followed. Trust didn't come easily, but it had begun. For the first time in centuries, peace felt possible. A month later, on Vesta Prime, the largest human colony, a massive ceremony was held. Crowds filled the streets. Ships flew overhead in formation. Holograms displayed scenes from the war, from exile, from victory. Jackson stood on a raised platform, flanked by veterans, diplomats, and colony leaders. He didn't wear a captain's uniform anymore. The war was over. His role had changed. Now he was a builder, not of ships, but of futures. He stepped forward to speak. "Years ago they banished us," he began. Voice calm, clear. "They called us dangerous, unstable, a threat to order." He looked over the crowd, faces young and old, scarred and strong. "They were right to be afraid, not because we were violent, but because we were determined. Because even when they locked the door, we found another way." He paused. "And we didn't just survive. We created. We unified. We built something from the ashes." Cheers erupted across the plaza. People lifted their hands, some crying, others smiling, all remembering what had been lost and what had been earned. Jackson raised his voice above the noise. "This is our new dawn, not just for humans, but for all those who have been forgotten, silenced, or left behind. We are not exiles anymore." The crowd roared. "We are the future." That night, Jackson walked through the halls of a new learning center on Vesta. Children laughed in classrooms. Engineers trained at consoles. Maps of new space routes flickered on the walls. A young cadet, no older than 10, approached him shyly. "Sir," the boy asked, "how did we win?" Jackson knelt down so they were eye level. His eyes were tired but kind. "We didn't win with bigger guns," he said. "We won by remembering who we are. We were broken, but we didn't stay that way. We were alone, but we chose to stand together. They banished us." He paused, then smiled gently. "But we built something stronger." The boy nodded, holding on to those words. Jackson stood and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the quiet. Above Vesta Prime, the Valkyrie remained docked, no longer a warship, but a symbol of strength. of resilience, of peace earned through fire, but not consumed by it. Humanity had returned, not to conquer, but to lead.